Hi there, hello, my name's Lines, it's great to see you. Now today we're going to be drawing the pelvis. We're going to go over how to draw it from every angle, front, back, sides, above, below, using a very straightforward and easy to modify method that you can use to build on any kind of character, male or female. Now, once we've gone over the method, I'll do a few demonstrations of how you can utilize this method on a few different figures. Then, I'll go through a full, complete, multi-character illustration to demonstrate this method within the context of a professional finished illustration. After that, there's going to be some homework. So, have a go at the homework, linked in the description, and then pop into the Discord and share your homework there. Currently, I go through and comment and give feedback on all submissions, usually the day after I publish a video. We have a great community where you can share your homework and other artwork for feedback or just talk to other artists and develop your skills. The link is in the description. Now, since this video will be on the pelvis, which unavoidably includes direct views of the crotch and the butt, there is basically no chance that YouTube is going to let this one go by without getting immediately demonetized. But it's something important that a lot of people would like help with, so I'm going to make it anyway. Now, if you like what you see and would like to see more of it, you can become a supporter on our Patreon, so please consider becoming a member over there. Now, the next batch of Patreon rewards, which are the original PSD files of the speed paints from these videos, is going to be going up the day after this video, so keep an eye out for those. And after the expressions of interest I've received from prospective students, I've started putting work on putting together a course, which should hopefully be beginning in the next month or so, and I'll let you know when that one comes live. So, with that done, let's get started. So, to begin then, let's get our basic shapes set up. A strong shape underneath your work will really help you build it out more reliably. So we're going to start at the very simplest, as for the pelvis, I like to use a sort of rounded rectangular prism. So if you imagine one that's sort of filled with a water balloon, or I've had it referred to as a sort of used eraser, where it has flat planes but rounded edges, or one of those Japanese watermelons, they grow sort of square shaped. Now we'll do the front and the back view just to map out the method, and then we'll use it in different angles and go through some of the nuances of how it moves, because the pelvis and legs have a lot of moving parts to them, and that'll affect the shape and how we draw them. So, starting with the front and back view, we're going to do the back view first because the front view actually relies on some parts of the back view. Now we'll do the rib cage here above the pelvis, again with a simplified shape. We'll draw that center line in, and now we're going to cut that pelvis with some what I call watermelon slices. One down the middle, and then two diagonal slices around. Now they don't go directly meet up in the middle. Divide them bottom into roughly fifths to give yourself that thigh gap. And then draw lines from the corners down to the sides of those thigh gap, or that middle fifth. And then draw two more slices, dividing those sides in half again for a line to guide where to put the thigh creases and also where to thicken the thighs as they come out from the side. Now the back view on the right here, we're going to do a V shape that comes down about halfway, and then we'll do lines along the top because that's where the butt cheeks attach along that top edge. We'll do a little line past the bottom of the pelvis, and we'll extend the butt cheeks down and out on that. So we'll probably extend it out around about a quarter of the length of the pelvis itself, and then we'll draw the hips in. You can see it works at different sort of shapes and sizes based on the size of the legs underneath it. And so now we'll shape that out. Now those guidelines that we have there, we're not going to draw all of them in as lines. They're just to inform us where the mass is, some of which we won't describe with line at all. We're going to describe it with our shading and form. So these construction shapes aren't just here to tell us where to put lines, they're here to tell us where to put volumes and shading later on. Now that's the back view. We're going to join it then to the upper body. You don't have to put too much detail here. Normally just a line for the center of the spine is enough, but you can see where it connects with the bands of muscle that come down along beside the ribs. Now coming over the front view here, we'll put in the navel, and we'll start with the band of muscle and sort of fat that comes down from the rib cage. This is where the abs go. It comes down and sort of maybe comes about halfway down the pelvis, or maybe a third of the way down the pelvis, up to you. But just for reference, this band is the band of the abdominal muscles above the navel, and below it, it's a unified sort of band of muscle. It's not really necessary to do line art for it, but it's important to have that guideline there for when you're shading. Next thing we'll do is the mons. So this is that sort of extra pad of flesh that sits on the groin. It usually comes up about a third of the pelvis. So now with that connected to the rib cage, we'll draw those bits of butt cheek there that you can see from the front. And now we know how they're made, we know where those lines go. And again, we'll draw the thighs in, remembering that they'll sort of bulge out for the first third, narrow for the first 2/3. I've got a limb shaping video you can look at for the limbs, but that's them connected in there. Now, since this is for YouTube, I'll be drawing the underpants in first, so that this doesn't get pulled down. You don't have to, you probably won't, but we'll start with that, and then we'll do just some neatened up sketching. You know, you'll probably do line art at this stage, but I'm just doing this to quickly get the forms neatened up. And you can see I'm not using much of the construction shapes for the line work here. Those construction shapes are primarily to inform where I put the tone. So I'll put a bit of shading in, and I'll use those guidelines underneath to tell me where to start and stop the tone and shading and how to shape those figures. And so same with the back then, you can see the line of the butt cheek. I haven't done it with hard line art, but rather I've done it with the edge of a bit of shading, because it's not something that has a hard crease except in the middle, although that hard crease can go further out as the leg moves, and we'll get onto that in a sec. But you can see there how the shading is informed by that structure. Now, moving on, let's find a good space here on the page. And we'll draw out the construction shape for the side of the pelvis. And we'll bend the ribs back just so we can really pop those sort of the bones of the pelvis out. Now, remembering those watermelon slices, they have those two diagonal slices that come down along those edges. The front quarter of those is what we want to use to define where those protruding hip bones will be. Obviously, this won't be true on every figure. Some of them may not have the hip bones visible. They might be too sort of fleshy, but that's where they are on characters that do have it visible. And then from halfway down the pelvis, that's where we have the leg extend out. Now on the back, remembering that the buttock comes down further than the bottom of the pelvis bone. So and it comes all the way around the side of the pelvis as well. It's thinner around the side, but it is still a mass there. And now, as we bend the leg forward, the bottom edge of the buttock, this edge here, it's sort of stitched on. So it stretches the buttock down with the movement of the leg. So the leg position will decide the shape of the bottom of the buttock. Now, if the leg was straight and it was in line with the pelvis, that would cause a bit of a crease there. Because as the leg is compressed, it causes a crease. But as the leg is stretched and bent and the flesh is stretched around it, it gets thinner because it's the same volume over a longer space. So it gets stretched thinner. So that crease disappears. So that crease is only visible when the leg is straight or when the leg is bent backwards. If you draw that crease in when it's not, it'll look like they have kind of saggy bags, like butt bags, which is very seldom visually appealing to have. Now, the other thing I want to talk about with the side view is how to map out those pads that you see in the front view. So that's the thickened pad of the stomach and how it comes down to the navel, and then also the thickened pad of the mons down there. So we'll do the side view here with the leg, and remembering to draw the butt in. Remember, the butt comes down further than the pelvis. And remembering also the small of the back, if the back is bent backwards, even on a very slender character, you will get a fold and a crease there. So same as how the butt will only have a crease when it's bent together, the back will do the same thing. So let's add now the pad of the line of where the abs are. That's that line there, you can see from the front view. And there's also the mons as well. So we'll shade them in red so you can see how they add volume, and that's what's responsible for those, the sort of shape subtlety on the side view of the pelvis there. So now let's do another shape, but here we're going to do the view from below. So about halfway to the center of the bottom surface of the pelvis, we'll draw a sort of V shape in, and we'll draw in sort of cross sections of the legs below it. And then we'll draw the butt. Now remember, the butt is an addition to the pelvis, so it gets added, and you can see how it comes in under, around and beside the crotch there. So it's these pads of fat will come in and around. And there's the sort of mons bulging out there. Now this is going to be true on male and female figures as well. And so you can also remember that the bottom edge of the butt cheek is, again, stitched onto the legs. So if the legs bend upwards, they'll come upwards. If they bend outwards, then the butt will bend outwards along with it. You can imagine that edge they're stitched onto the leg with as sort of the top of an imaginary high, sort of thigh high. And as that edge, that circular rim moves, it takes it with it. So if, for instance, we have legs that are bent down, you'll see the flesh stretched around the bones of the pelvis. And one thing you'll notice is it starts to make these sort of implied sort of surface edges. Now, you won't actually have corners on the butt, but you'll see the curves affected by them. And also remember, of course, not to add sort of separated butt creases when the butt's bent. You know, that'll end up with like looking like a slice of bread instead of a bakery. Now, one of the other things is to really dig into what that band is that comes down from the rib cage. So we'll do a sort of muscular figure sort of sitting. So we've got the pelvis here for the mons, and then that band above it, you can see that is where the abs are. So we'll do a more muscular figure here, and we'll use some shading to sort of map out those forms. And you can see on a muscular figure, for you to really see the muscles, they must have a lower body fat because that smooths it out. So we'll show a lot more of the pelvis bones as well on this figure. And you can see that's those muscles there. So you can either have it as a thick band or you can have it as individual muscles, but that's what that volume is. And so here is that same one. We've got it with a very slender figure and then a much bigger figure. Now you can see the method applies, but your choices in how thick to make the thighs or how much of a difference you want in the width of the rib cage and the pelvis will decide what kind of form you get. The method will still apply, but it's up to you to decide on what kind of figure you're going to have it apply. Now, just quickly on the shape of the butt cheek, we're going to imagine it as a flat piece of clay in this shape. First, we're going to round up the sides, and then you can see it's got this little hook bit there. Now, that hook bit, we're going to fold that one up. That's that bit that comes up along beside the crotch. So if we then have another bottom view of the pelvis, imagine that bit of clay, if we're looking at it from the bottom, with that little arm that comes up and sort of sticks to the side of that sort of crotch wedge there. And you can see that if the leg moves out, it'll widen that little hook of butt there. So that's that bit there, those bits are connected there. And just like how the butt is connected to the leg, they're connected to the inside of the crotch. Now here's a few of them just sort of in context to show that principle. So we'll do that same V shape at the top, and then we'll do the butt around, so that extra flesh, and it gets stretched along the bottom as the legs bend, it comes down with it. And when viewing it from the top, again, we won't see that bottom edge because it's from above, but remembering that it is this sort of cup shape, like a bra insert, it sort of comes around and wraps it, and it gets right up in there, around the edge of the crotch, and can even be seen from the front. So remember, it's not just a thing that's viewable from the back. And also remember to change the shape as the leg bends. So here, if we bend the leg back, that bottom edge will come up. But here on the left, with the leg bent down and forward, then the bottom edge of the butt comes down and forward because it's attached to that imaginary sort of thigh high. That's where it sticks onto. And it will only crease when the leg is up. Now we'll do a few views then of the butt and the pelvis from different angles. So here straight on, you can see, won't be much of a crease there. And now if we see the butt bent down, you will get a crease on the leg on the right there because it's coming towards the frame. But the leg on the left, it won't have any because it's being stretched out. You can see those points where it attaches. Now, if you're seeing it from like a high angle or from the back, you'll see mainly that sort of broad section on the back of it, but you can see how it comes out and down beyond the edge of the pelvis. And then again, if we're seeing it from below with the leg straight, those creases underneath the butt cheek will be very prominent because the flesh is being pushed together there. Now with that, let's try a few different angles on the front view of the pelvis. So here's one from the front, like the figure is from below, but we're seeing the pelvis from the front. So all those pieces will be drawn essentially on the front. You'll still probably have a little bit of the butt coming around, butt cheek coming around to the thigh, depending on the angle. And here's one from a very low angle, and you can see the way we draw the mons is it's much sort of longer, and we're keeping in mind that bottom sort of corner edge of the pelvis. And now, when we have the legs bent apart, you see more and more of that bit of butt cheek that comes around and attaches to the thigh. So the more the legs are bent out or the knees lifted up, the more of it you will see. And then, if we want to bend the leg right up, so from the front, you'll see that section of butt cheek come up around and attach. That's what that little ridge is there. Now you don't have to draw a line in to divide it, but it's going to change the outward shape of the leg there when you draw it up. Now, let's go through, apply these then to a bunch of different figures. Now these wireframes I'm drawing here, I'm going to include these on the homework sheet for you to complete them as you like. So, starting with the one on the top left there. So, drawing in those watermelon slices to decide where we put the where it joins the thighs, and then that sort of the mons bulge there, as well as the one around the navel. Same thing here. We're going to bend the legs down and away. And remember, we won't see that bit of the butt cheek that is viewable from the front from every angle. It'll only be visible when the legs are open or wide. Now we'll do two here with, again, different builds. So really narrow pelvis and really narrow legs to make a really slender looking figure. Whereas here we'll do quite a wide pelvis compared to the ribs, and we'll also make the legs much wider as well to make that sort of curve more prominent. And remembering a little crease there between the pelvis and the ribs for the bend. And now when we have the legs apart, we'll see a bit of that sort of the butt cheek that comes around to the front. We'll see that more the more the legs are apart. And here again, we'll do a narrow pelvis next to a really big pelvis. So again, those shapes are going to be defined by what you do for how thick you want the thighs, how thick you decide the pelvis to be, and how thick you do the rib cage. And now, reverse of that, let's do like a sitting pose of a pelvis, and let's make it just really, really wide and really, really fleshy. And you can see the flesh pushing, against itself. So you'll have the thighs pushing against the mons. We'll have the thighs being pushed up by whatever they're sitting on. And you'll have very more prominent creases with a sort of thicker, more fleshy character. Those creases will happen more easily and more often. And then we'll do a back view here with the leg lifted up. Again, remembering the butt cheek, that sort of midline of where the butt cheeks are will come out further than the midline of the pelvis itself because it's adding mass, it's adding thickness. So it'll add extra width, it'll add extra length, it'll make it bigger. And now with the legs fairly straight, we'll get a bit of crease there, but not much of a one. And here we'll do a sort of a curve to the back there, and we'll do the legs sort of sticking, we'll have them sort of bent. And you can see when it's fairly straight, you won't get like a crease, but you can sometimes get a bit of a curve in that line of the butt cheek there, where that sort of flesh is coming together, but it's not creasing yet. And then when we have the legs apart, like someone who's sort of like sprinting or running, we'll have that butt cheek that sort of stretches down and around towards the knee. So you won't get a crease there, but you might get the sort of flesh pulling away from the crotch. Whereas the other leg that's up and back, you'll see it and that sort of imaginary thigh high. That edge is going to cause a sort of a crease there, but maybe not if they're slim enough. If they're a very, very slim character, you might not get much of it. Similar to the very thick character folding easily, very thin characters won't fold easily. And so here we'll do a sort of low angle, and with that we're going to have a bit more of that sort of visible crease on the inside of the thighs, and you can see where the butt cheek comes down around beside the crotch and comes almost all the way to the front. Again, we'll do a sort of bent side view here, remembering how to map out where the crotch is, but you won't necessarily see it. So bigger characters will have more mass to the butt, and that more mass will mean that you'll see less and less of that sort of section of the crotch depending on the angle. With very, very fleshy characters, mean that you can only really see it from almost directly behind, just because the flesh will come out further. So the crotch is attached to the pelvis bone itself, whereas the butt cheek is flesh that is added to it, which means it can occlude parts of that bone mass of the pelvis. And here another sort of low angle, and with the tilt then to the legs, we see a part of that butt you can see from the front on one side but not on the other, because as the leg comes forward, that cheek won't be visible. And here we'll have a sort of a lying down kind of side view where you might see a bit of the crotch, but you probably won't see much of it at all. And you'll have that pad there for the pelvis as it comes down, but most of it will be occluded as well. And here we'll do sort of two figures, and we'll really simplify it too. Remember, this is a method you can use without necessarily showing all the detail and all the different forms. You can use this on just very simplistic forms. So just a few lines there, and so long as the structure underneath it is right, the simple forms will portray that. And you don't have to draw all the construction shapes. They can just be something to sort of keep in mind when you're drawing. Once you're sort of familiar with them, you can put them on autopilot and you don't really need them. Now here we'll do pelvis with the knees up, and you can see there's that sort of the fold from the mass of the thighs that'll sort of push along the sides of the mons there. And so with that then we'll add the butt in there. And we don't need to show how the ribs connect on this one because it's occluded by the legs, but we remember how that one works. And so here we'll do the legs apart on this one just towards the bottom here. So same thing, we'll have the leg, one leg coming towards the viewer and one leg off to the side there. Remembering to map out those features and remember where the butt would come around from the back, and then mapping out those front features as well. That's why we showed you the front and back view together, because quite often you'll use your understanding of both the front and the back. Now here we'll have a character who's like squatting, like maybe under a car, fixing an engine or something, probably. And so we'll map out those features of where the rib cage connects to the pelvis. We'll do the mons there along that sort of ridge of the bone of the pelvis there. We'll do the legs, and we'll have those parts of the butt that come around to the front. And since it's a fairly low angle and the legs are really bent, we'll see quite a lot of it. And now with the knees mapped out, we can then do the clothing on there. And here's a really tricky one, standing splits. But if we follow the method, it actually becomes very straightforward. So the leg that's going up is going to be stretched a lot. So that bit of the butt you'll see there will be stretched out so thin there won't be a ridge for it. Whereas the one going down, we'll have that one described. I'll just redo this section because OBS cut off the end of the recording of this figure. And so map it out, draw those imaginary sort of thigh highs there to decide whether there's going to be a crease or not. And then map out the features of the pelvis, so the mons, the bulge there below the belly button. And you can see it's actually fairly easy to do these fairly extreme poses if you remember how they connect. So have a go at this one yourself. So let's move on then to the speed paint. So let's start then with our 3 figures. So I'm going to do an Olympic one with 3 Australian athletes. They're all sort of invented ones. I'm afraid I started this one too late to do a picture of someone, one of our great Australian athletes doing some breakdancing, which is a shame because it was just too unique and it's probably the most memorable part of it. Now, we'll do on just the basic figures, very gestural, and I'm going to do these figures all sketching on separate layers. The reason is for a multi-character composition like this, it can be a bit tricky to get the placement of all the characters together. You might want to move sort of some parts that are overlapping other parts. So I'll do them in different colors on different layers so I can tune them and move individual parts of them without having to move the rest of the sketch. And then of course I'll work as a unified layer once I start the inking. So you can see how I'm doing the pelvis. We've got the leg bent up, and so there's no butt crease there. But on the one that's straight, there is a butt crease. Actually, the facial expression here, this one's someone who's doing like the javelin throw. I'm sure the form is not necessarily excellent javelin form, but it's, you know, it's artistic license, just tuning the face there and getting some movement that I'll show through the hair. So it's one of those sort of collage photos you see. Now this other character here, I'm going to have them doing like a high jump. So they'll be sort of bending back over. This one was kind of hard to get I tried to look at a few references before I started this one. They don't get photos of the high jumpers from the front, just because it would be an Olympic photo of just a crotch. But for this video, I decided to give it a red hot go. And so those are the forms there. And again, you can see I'm doing them in different colors so I can visually pick them apart, because it can also get quite busy if you have a multi-character composition. You can have a lot of bits going over, and it can be a bit confusing to see what line is someone's finger or what line is someone's hip. So it's worth doing them in different colors just to help you map those things out in your mind. Although you may have some sort of future brain that allows you to do it without getting confused. If so, you know, you have my envy. Now I'm just going to tune in some of the shapes here on the face. So just softly erase them out and just go on in to get some of the more sort of refined sketch details in. And then adding in some shapes for the shirt and adding a bit more sort of shapes for the foot that's coming directly forward to the viewer. This one can be quite tricky to show, like extreme foreshortening where it's being looked at directly from the front. And here's me trying multiple times to draw a shoe, eventually giving up and going to Kmart's online store. Thank you, kids shoes, $7, sizes 4 to 6. And now this is the runner shoes. I'm just sort of inventing the pattern on the bottom there. and then putting more detail into the hair, and adding the pole then for the javelin, and making sure that it doesn't overlap any of the sort of features of the high jumper. And this one, just going for a thinner bit of line art here. So I'm starting the line art, and again, I just use a very a hard round brush with no change of size. It's just standard size, and a lot of smoothing to get the basics out. And then I'll do another pass and go over the line art with another hard round brush to add in extra bits of line weighting where it will be ambiently occluded. I am planning to make a line art video in future. We're going to get through all of the what and then the how. So we'll go through, you know, the what, which is how to draw the parts of the body, how to draw clothing, etc. And then we'll go to the how, which will be things like perspective, action, inking, shading. So this one's going to be, we're still in phase 1, which is the what, but we're moving on to the how fairly shortly. Now, we're just doing a bit of detailing then on the inking of the hair and doing at the back there. And again, I'm not using much line for showing this. I'm going to do a lot of my description of form using tone. So I'll use my shading to describe a lot of the form where I don't feel like line would be necessary. And just straightening up the ear, drawing in the javelin on a separate layer, and then just erasing out the bits that overlap. That's most of the line art there. And with that, once that's tuned, I'll color the line art so I can see where I have and haven't done the line art thickness. So adding little bits of ambient occlusion here, just to sort of add dark spots to those darkest areas that wouldn't get any light. So that's where like the fingers fold, where two surfaces get too close together, like the hair or the little creases under the fingers there, or the creases in the shorts they're wearing. And just getting through all of them. Now once that's done, I can then start getting in the flats. So I'm just going to do a bit more detailing on the shoes here before I get started dotting those flats. And also adding any areas of solid black, so things like the eyes there. Now just thinking about the colours, I was going to go for a sort of multi-coloured group, but I decided that green and gold's probably the best one. Apologies to those people in Brazil who felt represented by this one. I apologise. It was Australia. There's probably a few other countries out there that use green and yellow as their colours. Because they're great colours, they look great together. Ours is the green and gold. I think it's representative of the wattle. Now I'm just dropping a great big layer of green here behind my flats, just because it helps show all those little gaps where I haven't sort of coloured it in properly. The green will show up much better. Now with the flats done, I can now work on a very, very simple background. So you can see I'm just using big blobs of flat colour here. I don't have to worry too much about the detail because I plan to blur the background out a lot with this one, just because it's a very complicated multi-character illustration, meaning that I'm going to have trouble directing focus with this one with so much going on in the picture. It's going to be like a Where's Wally. There'll be too much detail. So I'm just going to use very simplified detail for the background. So I'm just doing here a little Olympic Stadium. So you can see it's just some basic shapes and then some blobs, blur them out for the lighting. Now with that, I can start on the shading. Now for this, what I'm going to do is I'll use the lasso tool to select the areas I plan to shade. I'll use a soft airbrush to brush the shading in, and then I'll use a blender on some of those hard edges to smooth them out. But some of the hard edges I'll keep. The hard edges, like for instance the bit under where the shirt drops a shadow, that really helps me show a hard edge to the shadow, which is great for showing that it's a dropped shadow. Whereas then as it rounds part of the shoulder, I can smooth that out to show that that's a shadow that's based on the direction the surface is facing. So I like to do it with a lasso to start off with, just because it's a great way of dropping really even tone that I can then mess with once it's dropped in. And just doing a bit more for the rest of the figures now. And doing some now on the clothing, so where the shadows would be there. And just getting the lasso, grabbing where I think the shading would be. Remembering that the shorts will be kind of sort of glossy, so I won't map them directly, like shading them like they're a matte surface from light source. I'm going to shade them as though they're a sort of reflective surface. And now just doing a bit of shading on some of the detail points. So that would be things like the inside of the mouth, the eyes, and where the fabric would drop small shadows. And then doing a bit of a soft shadow around on the shorts and the one on the left there, just to give it a bit more shape. going over the same thing with the hair, lasso tool. And now I'm cloning my flats and linking them to my shading layer and setting that linked layer to brightness and another one to hue. This lets me use my flats layer to control how light or dark my shading is. I've got this explained in the post-processing video for a bit more information on how to sort of get your shading to be a bit sort of smarter without having to put too much effort in. Now here I'm adding a bit of skin tone variation, where I add a bit of sort of red where the bones come close to the surface. And on the girl with the dark skin, I'm adding pale skin on the palms and fingernails there. You notice that a lot with people who have like darker skin, you'll notice it more and more where there's always sort of paler skin on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet and the undersides of the fingers there. So it's worth adding that detail in to help that figure look more like they've got like proper skin and not sort of plasticky, because you know plastic bodies are always this universal one. Now the same way I'm doing the shading with the lasso tool, I've started on the highlights with the lasso tool as well. And similarly, I'll map out the areas I want to have highlighted. I'll brush them in and then I'll maybe erase them, maybe smooth the edges of them, but it's a good way to block them in. And you can also remember that the lasso tool in most software will let you use brush smoothing to make it generate smoother lines so it's not sort of shaky. You can have smoothing up all the way on the lasso tool to help it make really nice smooth edges for nice large flat areas of tone. Now I've set the highlight layer to glow. What that means is it'll give it a bit more saturation as it blends the midtones. Now with the outfits, I'm just putting a bit of green on the yellow and a bit of yellow on the green and doing a bit of a freeform Australia there. These aren't official uniforms because I feel like the takedowns from footage would probably extend to uniform, so I'm just sort of being safe and inventing my own. And now doing a bit of shine on the shoes there, which I forgot. And now going over and doing a bit of sort of sweat, just because you know it's exercise, it's active. And so I'll go over first and do a layer of multiply and do sort of the edges of the water, and then I'll go and do a separate one, which is the normal layer on top, and add the white highlights to those bits of sweat, and that'll sort of give me the sweaty look. Now remembering that the sweat highlights have to be on a layer above your inking because you want it to show up over the edges of lines where it comes there off the chin. Now I've also added some subsurface scattering, and I'm just making a little sort of steam cloud puff there, which is the hard round brush, and then cloning it out so I've got that sort of that heavy sort of breathing exercise feel. And here I've got a screen layer in light blue, and I'm using that to send some parts back to sort of separate the characters from each other. And now just a quick glow, and it's basically finished. I'll just do a color hierarchy with an overlay layer. Normally I wouldn't have that bright, but I felt like a strong gold look to it was appropriate given the subject. And just tuning in the contrast and maybe blurring that front foot out a bit more, and I'm done. So here we are, we've got the illustration finished. It's got all three figures. We've shown the pelvis in different angles from different positions, and I think it's worked okay. Now with that, if you'd like to have a go yourself, remember we have a homework sheet. That's linked in the description, so grab a copy of it, give it a draw, see how you go, try either the forms from the video or try your own ones and see how you like the results. Come on into the Discord, share it there. I do go through all the homework usually the day after I publish a video, so I look forward to seeing it there and commenting on those. And again, if you like the video and want to see more like it or see it more regularly, or would like to help me make up for the fact that this video is just never going to be monetized, consider becoming a member on our Patreon. The Patreon awards should be live the day after this, and there's a bunch of PSD files that are available for all the previous speed paints I've done. And again, with the classes, they'll probably be starting pretty soon. Now that I've got all everyone's expressions of interest, I know where to target the work we're going to do, and I'll start putting those classes together, and more information on that's going to be available over the next probably month or so, and updates will be put in the Discord. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. You have a good day, and I'll see you soon. Cheers. Bye.